Alright guys, welcome back to the dojo. Um, Here in the studio, late at night. This is my church, my temple, and I hope you create a artistic, creative space that is just as good as this so that you can get into flow. I've been listening to some old school Prodigy. Most, if not all of you, will not know who that is. If you don't, you're missing out. So if you can, check out the Prodigy. Great song to start with is Firestarter. And that is some of my studio jams. I'm in here, got my music going, let my mind expand. I've switched from a Herrera Esteli Norteño cigar to some Jack Herer. For those of you who don't know what that is, good. For those of you who do, even better. So we're going to keep going with the Bifrost graph editor, but we're going to do something a little bit different. So let's go back up to Windows here in Maya. We're going to open up our Bifrost graph editor. We're going to create a new graph. And let's start this time. We're going to hit tab and we're going to create a sphere. So we're going to create an input mesh sphere. There we go. Nice. And once again, let me kind of scale this so we can see what's going on. Move all of this so everybody can see what's happening. And once again, if I connect the input of the sphere to the output, we'll see that we've got a sphere here on the screen. Alright, so I am going to say that this sphere's radius should be about 20. It's a little dramatic. Let's go for 10. Alright, 10's good. Okay. Now, let's disconnect this and we're going to put a few more nodes in here. So remember, we can ignore this input node unless we want to start to animate things, keyframe them. For now, we're just going to stay with creating a static object. Alright, so let's create a scatter node, and we're going to scatter points, and it's scatter by number. Alright, and you'll see what I mean by that in a little bit. So we're going to connect our sphere mesh to our geometry, and then let's connect our points to our output node. And you'll see that here on screen, if I zoom out a little bit, you'll see that we've got some points here in space. I'm going to turn the grid off just so we can see this a little more easily. And much like our last graph, we're going to create a vector field scope. Alright. And let's connect this in. So we're going to connect points to our vector field, and then our output to our sphere mesh. Actually, sorry, let's connect points to probe geometry. Let's delete that. Just highlight it, hit delete, and we're going to connect that out. Now, you won't see anything happen just yet until we hit one more node, and we're going to set our strand size profile. So we're kind of going, set strand size profile, keep scrolling down. Alright, put that here. Let's move all this over a little bit. Sorry, I'm trying to make it as easy to see as we can. And let's set our Arnold. Let's type in Arnold. Let's set our Arnold strand settings. And you can connect things just the way I'm doing here. There we go. And we'll start to see something happening on screen here in a minute. Alright, now don't freak out if we're not seeing anything happen yet. We've got a couple of more connections to make. Really nothing's happening yet because this vector field scope is a little weedy. So we are going to create a fractal turbulence field. So let's go fractal and let's create a fractal turbulence field. Yes, and we're going to connect that in to our vector field. All right, now, ooh, yeah, we got some stuff happening. Now let's go to our vector field scope and let's display flow lines, and let's set that to something like 50. Ooh, there we go. All right, now we're cooking with gas. I've kind of zoomed out a bit here so that we can see that this fractal turbulence field is a little bit weedy. So we are going to create a scale field. Once again, we'll hit our tab key, and we want scale field. Be careful because, again, scalar field, scale field, they're very different things. But I want to feed the scale field in here, and then I'll feed it in here, and come on now, cooperate. There we go. And so that I can set this to maybe say like 10, 10, 10. That's what we're looking for right there. All right. And I can change these values as I keep on working. So what I'm going to do real quick, hold on, let me pull this so that you can see the quote-unquote recipe so that you can mimic it as much as you can. And remember, you can tweak these things, change them for your own purposes, discover what's going on. For the most part, I've found over the past 30 years that art is a happy accident. So I'm going to kind of pause, leave a natural pause point so you can look at this recipe and rebuild it right here. So feel free to pause and kind of take a moment to build this the same way I've built it here. Now keep in mind that I'm going to come to my set Arnold strands settings, and for mode override we're going to switch it from default to thick. Now that just makes it able to render in the Arnold render engine and allows us to go in and tweak the actual strand settings. But for this one, we're not actually going to make strands. You'll see here in a couple of minutes what we're going to do with this graph. We're going to tweak it a bit and do something a little different. Now I've actually gone and increased the scale field to 40, 40, 40 here, just so we get kind of a little bit more presence in the space. And in the vector field scope, we can increase this number or decrease this number. I'm going to put it back to 24. All right, so we're controlling things quite nicely at this point. As you can see, we've got ourselves a nice organic structure. Now I want you to think though, what happens if instead of create a mesh sphere, we did a mesh torus or a mesh cube? I want you to feel free to try those different things out and plug them into the geometry tab here and see how those different geometric structures create far different or varying organic structures here in space. And now here, this is where we're going to change things up a bit. So we've got our strand structure set up. Actually, let's move this out right here. We're going to start to create points along this strand structure. So we're going to create a node that says get point position. All right, right here. And so let's plug this geometry, boom, in, and we're going to plug that out right here. Now don't worry that nothing's happening yet. We're going to put a couple of other nodes in here that'll make sure that everything happens in its normal course. So let's create another node right here called construct points. All right, there. And there'll be a default here that we can kind of tweak when we want to. And so, boom, connect in here and connect out here to sphere mesh. All right, so a couple of other nodes. Well, one other one for sure that we're going to add right now so we can get what we want. But if I were to zoom in here, you'd see that instead of just strands and flow lines, we now have points constructing our structure here in space. So now let's set the point shape. Hit tab, set point, and let's set the point shape. And there will be a default here that we can kind of tweak. So let's connect points here, boom, and let's connect out to sphere mesh. Whoop, come on, work with me. There we go. So right now, the set point shape is defaulting to disk. And this is where we can have a little bit of fun. So let me kind of arrange this again so that you guys can see the recipe a little more easily. All right, and here, here, construct points, push our output right there, and set point shape. So, whoops, there we go. So you can see that we've set this up the way we normally would set up our strands, but after the set Arnold strands settings, we've put in a get point position, a construct points, and a set point shape node between that and the output. Now the set point shape node is defaulting to disk, but if I hit the drop down menu here, you can see that we can change it to all these different things. So let's go to sphere here, and you'll see that now our network is created from a point strand of spheres. Now this is pretty cool looking. So I can right click and let's assign our favorite material, AI standard surface. Like I said, I generally bring that down to a little bit of gray and a little bit up to here. Let's give ourselves, in our Arnold shelf, let's give ourselves a sky dome light. Let's turn that sky dome light to 0 under camera. And let's just take a look at what we've got here. We're about to tweak this a little bit more. Let's go to our render settings and make certain that we're set to 1920 by 1080, so HD 1080. And as always, in my viewport, I'm going to go to camera settings and turn on my resolution gate, right? So that I can see my, let's minimize that, so that I can see my composition. All right, so for now, this is what we've got. Let's bring our render window, up. Bring it from my other screen. This is our old render. Let's look at our new render and check it out. This is pretty cool. However, there's a lot of tweaking we can do here to really make this something interesting. As artists, our job is to learn to ad-lib as we're working in our creative tool space. So what I think I'm going to do here is let's go back to our vector field scope and let's change our flow line samples per second from 24, and let's see what happens if we go to like 8. Ooh, let's go to 2. Let's take a look at our render. So here in our vector field scope, we can adjust how many points per second it's sampling. And we can start to create a really interesting effect here. Let's maybe change that to, I don't know, let's say like 8. So once again, vector field scope, let's go 8, maybe 6. I'm just playing around here, and I hope you guys will do the same thing. But what's cool is that we've got this really organic structure. that we can control sort of its density based on the vector field scope's flow line samples per second. We can also say let's increase its flow line length in seconds so we can make it extend further out. So as you can see, there's a lot we can kind of do here. I'm going to hit stop on that render. I can then go to the scatter by number node here and increase the amount from, say, 1,000 to 5,000. And I'm increasing that scatter point. Again, we'll look at our render here. You can see how we can tweak all of these settings, man. That is just like so wild to me. You know, there's a lot we can do in here. So let's do 8,000. So we're increasing density in the scatter points, and we have the ability to go into the vector field scope and say bring this down, tweak this up or down. Let's go to about 5 here. And once again, all of these changes will really dramatically change the visual impact. Let me bring that up here so you guys can see it. The visual impact of what we're creating. Now we're creating an abstract structure, and I think so often students are so addicted to narrative that they forget that there's so much beauty in abstract structure. I think of it when I walk out into nature and I look at the way that leaves grow and tree trunks decay and water splashes. That's what we're doing here. We're working with mathematical formulas. I'm looking at this whirl right here, this vortex whirl, and I might want to zoom in on it, right? And I've got these structures in the foreground creating a nice figure ground relationship. We'll pull this up so I can choose so many points, whether my camera was still or whether my camera was animated, to choose these very visually compelling structures that reflect, thought, consciousness, creation, all of these beautiful things here in the Bifrost graph editor. And here's the thing, I'm using the fractal turbulence field to define the way these points are spread throughout the vector field scope through the scale field in this space. So if I wanted to, I'm just going to kind of hunt for very interesting shapes in here, and then perhaps I can tweak the fractal turbulence field, increase the magnitude to 3. You can see that we get a much more chaotic environment. Or I can say the number of frequencies, 1. And again, all of these points can be keyframed. So let's look at our render again. Honestly, I know I'm nerding it up a little bit, but I could do this all day, just looking for interesting structures within this space and seeing how the mathematics change based on the numbers I put in. 2, number of frequencies, 5, frequency, let's increase that a bit. Now we're getting much of a more disorganized field. Let's set this to about 0.25. Getting much more organization, so on and so forth. Ooh, I like this area right here. I might zoom in on that. Again, let's take a render just to see what we've got. Oh, mon Dieu. That's beautiful. Now, keep in mind, we're also shading this in a very, very basic way. Let's bring that magnitude back down to 1. And we're reorganizing that structure into something a little bit more elegant. Again, I could keyframe that by adding an input node. Oh, look at that. What happens if I put this magnitude down at like 0.25? Now we're getting a very tightly organized structure. And again, I could add an input node and keyframe that so that it went from extremely organized to more disorganized. So if I wanted to, I could take this input node and plug it into our magnitude here, and then by selecting our Bifrost graph editor in our outliner here, I'll come up to magnitude and I'll say at frame 0, you guys know how I feel about frame 0, so I'm going to say frame 1 and frame 1. I'll right click and set a key, and then by about frame 100, let's put this at about 1. Right click, and I'll set a key. And so as I'll pull this out, minimize that, and as you can see, if I rewind and play, we're going from completely organized, and we're slowly introducing entropy via the magnitude of our fractal field here. So we can quote unquote grow this structure out. And once again, if I take a render at any point in time, it is simply going to be visually beautiful. I mean, look at that. I am not, however, tied in to anything I do. Right now we have a fractal turbulence field driving the form of our shape. If I decided instead, hit tab, to do a fractal turbulence field or a curl noise field, we'll get a very different result. So I'll plug that in here. And this is something where you guys can really sort of experiment around. So we've got this fractal turbulence field. Oops, sorry. Wrong one. Let's do a fractal noise field. There we go. Here we go. Fractal noise field. And you can see that this changes the form dramatically. Let's do a quick render really right here to see what we've got. And this is something I do. I render a lot. I do a lot of test renders to make sure that the visual approximation that I'm getting is something that I would be interested in. Let's move that off. We may want to use it again. All right. Let's play with the magnitude here. Let's say 20. You can see that it's pushing it out. We can push number of frequencies up. This is a much more linear, structured, I guess you'd say, way to construct this form. Again, if I wanted to, I could do a curl noise field. So let's do a curl noise field here, just to see what it would do. And I'm plugging that again into the scale field, which is amplifying what we're doing. And you can see again that that is a very different result. One of the biggest points I'd like to get across is that we're here to experiment and to play around with the result. Now, we're going to pause here. I'm going to stop this tutorial, and we'll pick up again and talk about other ways we can manipulate this and how we can start to shade it in a more unique manner than just this AI standard shader hitting the light. All right, that's it for now. Remember to slam your fist on that like button. Appreciate you watching.